So welcome everybody. As we've been doing over the last two sessions, we want to welcome you to our forgiveness session and acknowledge that we are working and connecting together based on us being on the land of the Lekwungen speaking people, also known as the Songhees and the Esquimalt, and that you are on some other form of land. Some of you are here. And we do this in order to really recognize that this is a time of reconciliation in many ways, but this is one of the ways. And those of you who haven't met us, we're less than 2 meters apart because we are partners and authors and workers together in life. So we welcome you all, and so many of you have been on the whole series, and it's been phenomenal, and we really appreciate your contributions over the last 2 days, and we look forward to this last session where we focus on forgiveness.
And so today is the third in the series, the last in the series, and we're going to focus on forgiveness as a resilience practice this morning. And I think that as we think about forgiveness as a resilience practice, we need to begin to think about what forgiveness is and isn't. And we're going to get to that in a few minutes. And so our hope today is a couple of different things. One, that you begin to put the series together and think about your practices in times of hope, your practices lifting up your strengths in times of despair, and today that you leave with the kind of will it takes to forgive as part of your resilience practice, and to put it all together in that appreciative resilience model. So there are some people on who haven't joined us before, and so we're going to do a tiny bit of review, but really quickly this morning, so we can spend as much time as we can talking about forgiveness. But we thought we would actually maybe start this morning with a poem that I had open a second ago and now have managed to close, about forgiveness, because I think it helps set the context for the discussion about what forgiveness is and isn't. So we're going to start there this morning, and then we're going to go back to the resilience model for just a second, just to kind of set that context for folks that haven't been with us, and then we're going to go on to discuss forgiveness more in depth. Want to add anything?
No, that sounds wonderful.
Okay.
The poet is Joan, because people ask us who's the poet. So reminder to everybody again that Joan is the poet.
Yeah, and people have been asking me where they can find this poetry. Mm-hmm. And so you can find it in our book for sure. But also if you go to our company Instagram, which is Cacel MacArthur Blair, you can find it on Instagram as well. And if you can't find it there, by all means, email me and I will send it to you. And I offer it for you to use freely in any of your work where it's applicable. Forgiveness is not a blank slate. It does not offer absolution. It does not lighten the burden of past acts. Do not think it is easy, nor is it kind. Rather, it recognizes the power of rising again from the ashes of fires we ourselves have ignited, of dousing the flamethrowers gripped by circumstance and evil. It is a letting go and a holding close. It abides in love and champions knowing, and it walks with a steely and willful force. Forgive me.
I noticed in the chat there was, Amanda, you put the link in. Is there a hyphen in there? Will that
No,
work?
it's not.
Oh, so that's correct. Okay.
I took that straight from your Instagram.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Amanda.
And then just before we start, well, Amanda's already unmuted, or she just remuted herself.
I'm
but
unmuted.
But Amanda has done this wonderfully every morning for us, monitor the chat. And so I'm going to let Amanda kind of do the quick Zoom introduction about that, and then we'll move on to forgiveness.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thanks. And as Amanda said, like this morning is our last morning together. And so if there are things you want to say to the plenary as a whole, just, put a note to Amanda. Amanda, I want to speak to the plenary as a whole, or raise your hand if you can find that button, which is in the bottom of the participant list. And we'll make sure you have some voice. Also, I know we have other resilience scholars on with us this morning. I can see Madeline in my view, Madeline Blair. For those people who also write in resilience or do work in resilience, it'd be wonderful if you put your information in the chat so people could save that and connect with your work as well, and not just Jeannie's and I's work. That was grammatically incorrect. I apologize.
Our work.
Our work. There we go. So we're gonna just spend a minute with the model as a whole, and then we're gonna spend most of our time this morning talking about forgiveness specifically. And I'm just gonna share our screen here, and hopefully.
And thank you for bearing with us that first day where we couldn't get the PowerPoints to work, and then we did yesterday, and I think we're all okay right now too, are we? Is everybody seeing?
Amanda's moving. So this is the model we've been working with for the last 3 days. And as we said to everybody, Jeannie and I have been working on this for a long time. We've been talking to other people about their experiences of resilience. And we've been in particular talking to appreciative inquiry practitioners about their experience of resilience, because we're really interested in the way the power of appreciative inquiry can be used to uplift the practice of resilience. And so our interviews and conversations and writings are really driven toward uplifting the work of appreciative inquiry as a whole as it relates to resilience. And so you see the model on the screen in front of you. And we said this, I think the first day, might have said it yesterday as well. David Cooper-Ryder, has started appreciative inquiry in the 80s. And I want to do a particular shout out to him and his work. He did a very powerful thing in appreciative inquiry. He made appreciative inquiry a field of study, which allows us all to write and research in it. And so he's created this world movement of understanding these two really simple words, to appreciate and to inquire.
Mm-hmm. And we just want to also acknowledge that as he wrote the foreword for our book on building resilience with appreciative inquiry, he basically had the aha himself that appreciative inquiry began with an inquiry into the extraordinary. And then it moved into, well, if we can do it for the extraordinary, how about the ordinary? And then now, based on our work and other work that's going around the world around despair, he classified now the third rung of appreciative inquiry is being done in tragedy. So just want to acknowledge that too, because that's a powerful contribution to the ways that appreciative inquiry is being used in all ways around the world. And we have been looking at this model and briefly touching into the circle of appreciative inquiry. It is so powerful. Again, if you wanted to look at our book and read our book, there's all sorts of stories and examples of all the different ways you can use appreciative inquiry with building despair. I was going to say building despair. No,
do not build despair. We're just saying.
Building resilience with it. But each day we've taken a couple of the key principles, and today we wanted to just look at the two principles that we haven't mentioned yet, which are the principles of simultaneity and anticipatory. And they are really key, I think, right now in our focus on forgiveness, because simultaneity is all about the kinds of reactions that happen simultaneously as you ask a question. We often think, well, if I ask this question and get some research around what answers there are, things will change. And in fact, as soon as you ask a question, there's reaction and change based on that question. So in appreciative inquiry, we say, well, let's make sure we're asking generative and positive questions in order to get the kinds of reactions that will simultaneously happen with those questions. And then the anticipatory is what we hold in our minds as our visions for the future, which is an important thing right now. We can't really do that very well. So how can we hold images in our minds in this time of despair in COVID-19 pandemic? How can we work to hold and anticipate the images of the future so that will guide our current actions in evolving into that future, whatever that future may be? So I just wanted to comment on those two principles of appreciative inquiry.
Well, and one of the most powerful ways we're seeing the anticipatory principle play out at the moment in relation to what's going on in the world is the anticipation of the possibility of kindness, growing kindness. People are holding this vision of community and kindness and the ways in which that can be amplified. And so, so those are two of the principles. And so for those who haven't been with us, the appreciative resilience model is housed within all the notions of appreciative inquiry, which we're not going to go into this morning. And each of these three inner circles, which make up appreciative resilience in a whole within the appreciative inquiry practice, is our hope, the practice of hope and a hopeful view. To undertake every day to practice hope in some way. When despair visits, to hone a focus on your strengths in times of despair. And today we're going to talk about forgiveness. When we went out and talked to people about resilience, we really thought they would talk about moving from hope to despair and back and forth. We found they were talking about a third and very powerful element of resilience, which is forgiveness and the nature of forgiveness. So we're going to focus on that this morning.
Can I just go back? I just want to say one more thing. The being AI in the outer circle is, I think, the most important piece of this appreciative inquiry circle. And it's especially relevant to forgiveness, because in forgiveness, you really need to be present, be aware, be appreciative of what is in order to move into a state of forgiveness. And being AI has lots of parts to it, but one of the parts is really to have that ability of track and fan what you're seeing. So if you are in a state where forgiveness is important, you need to be able to look for that and look for it in others and look for it in yourself in order to then, when you're practicing it, because it's a challenge to practice sometimes, is to reward yourself for that. Say, wow, I was able to do that. I was able to be in that forgiveness state in order to move myself and others back to hope.
And so Jeannie's just kind of said this. Forgiveness is the gateway to beginning anew. It is that bridge between where you are and the possibility of hope. And it's not an easy bridge. You know, Jeannie and I sometimes think about forgiveness being a bridge built with heavy rocks that you have to pick up and carry with all your strength. It's not blithe, it's not simple. It is not a practice of absolution. It's not necessarily done with anyone else. And so Jeannie and I struggled a lot with this word forgiveness. We kept wanting to replace it with a different word in our resilience work. Compassion, empathy, equanimity, letting it go, all these things. We kept coming back to forgiveness. Because when we talk to people about their resilient lives, they talked about these moments where they came to a place where they realized that beginning anew was required. And with that came the dropping away of all that they had been carrying, all that they had been holding to be true, to rework. And so that sense of beginning anew. And we also, in talking to people, and maybe Jeannie wants to talk about this, talked about how much it's an act of will. It's not something like the practice of hope in some ways, although complex, is a little bit easier. The forgiveness really required a practice.
Well, I think one of the things is that forgiveness doesn't mean justice. That came up in one of our, this morning in our other session. And I thought, it doesn't mean that what was done was right, or that it's just, or that it's fair. But what was done. And it's a moment to say, accepting in some ways, but really just recognizing and appreciating that there's no way you can change the wrongness of things, but you can simply say that was, and now what are the opportunities to move forward from that? So in forgiveness, it's not, I'm forgiving you so everything's good. No, that was wrong, or I was wrong, or self-forgiveness or forgiveness of others, whichever way you're looking at it, is to then let that go and move forward. Move forward into conversations with others, conversation with yourself, but really moving forward into the possibilities ahead of you.
And this is one of the reasons that I wrote the poem on forgiveness, because it's a hard concept to understand, because people think that it's blithe in some way. Oh, I forgive you. It's all right. But it is such a deep and complex idea that actually I'm not going to get justice, that things actually are not going to be different than they are, that perhaps I will forgive and others will not. And so, we enter into this conversation, we call kind of a lot of our work a commentary. And we do that because we invite the ideas of others into our ideas, because these are hard concepts to work with and deal with. And so then the question is, what's the point of forgiveness and resilience? And if we think about resilience as a practice versus a place, people we interviewed talked about the practices. And to a one, they said that they got to a place where they understood that they needed to undertake forgiveness, regardless of justice, regardless of the right and wrong, regardless of that, in order to re-enter their practice of hope. And this was the place they talked about being the hardest in resilience, because it's the place where they got stuck and sometimes had to do it 19 times a day. I say that facetiously, but forgiveness isn't something we get to do once and it's like, oh, we're done and dusted. I've practiced forgiveness. I've undertaken it. I'm moving on. It's something that people talked about cycling back to again and again and again, and beginning the same process again.
I think we want to just pause to see if there's any questions or comments.
Yeah.
We're not looking at the chat. So is there anything, or if anybody?
There was just one question that went back when you were talking about anticipatory principle, about how it's related to hope. If you could speak to how the anticipatory process, or principle rather, is related to hope.
I think the anticipatory principle, like the easiest way that we understand the anticipatory principle is often through sports. Jeannie and I, many years ago, undertook to swim from Greek island to Greek island. And
That's a fundraiser. Yeah.
It was a fundraiser we were part of. And one of the plays in which the anticipatory principle plays in sport is you have to see the end. You have to anticipate, in our case, stepping up onto the shore. It's what allows the action to happen. Like if you don't have that anticipatory piece, you're not able to move. So Anticipatory has a huge role in hope, because we set in motion these ideas. We hold this vision of a possible future, whether it comes to be or not. Like, one of the days I was swimming, I got caught in a riptide. I'm holding my anticipatory principle, but I don't seem to be going anywhere, right? And so it doesn't always come to be, but it holds a vision of the anticipation of something. So hopefully that answers that question.
And I think it directly relates to hope, because having the images of hope and what it is that you would see in the future in a hopeful view is the best way to anticipate, because we can anticipate all the bad things that are going to happen. And that's not such a good thing to be doing, because yes, we can acknowledge and be realistic about some of those things to plan for. That's important. And at the same time, holding on to anticipating hope.
So I'm just going to stop the share for a minute. Is there anybody in the plenary who wants to add to our kind of commentary on forgiveness from their own work, or from ideas that are getting generated by this conversation, or have questions? And so just, unmute yourself and start talking. And if we get a bunch of people talking at once, we'll get Amanda to get some order to this. Denise, why don't we start with you, because you just raised your hand.
Well, I'm going to say the Creator has given me vast opportunities to practice forgiveness. And when I think about the anticipatory principle, I think about it from the perspective of there's going to be another side. I'm going to get to the other side. I think in the work that I've done, forgiveness has not always been easy. I think also from a perspective of being from an underserved population, that there is an anticipation in the old Denise that used to be there that things are not going to be good. So moving to that other side of becoming appreciative in the work that I do, and then moving to this place of literally profoundly believing that resilience can be a part of the work that we do, and resilience in forgiveness can really occur, and we can move, and in my situation, move to a different place. And then to see the results of that in itself has instilled hope in ways that I think have deeply touched my life. And I don't ever want to give it up, yet I know in my head that there is going to be another opportunity. There will be another opportunity where I may have to practice resilience. I may have to practice forgiveness again. I may have to go through and touch despair again. And I think many of us are touching despair right now. And it's important, I think, that the Creator's given me these opportunities then to share how we can move beyond that with those that I care about and I work with and that I interact with. So thank you.
Thank you, Denise.
Thank you. And for those that don't know, Dr. Denise Henning, she's one of North America's leading First Nations scholars and does an incredible amount of work in appreciative inquiry with her organizations. Anybody else want to throw something out to the plenary before we send you off to groups?
Hi, this is Nina here.
Hi, Nina.
I somehow, from the way forgiveness has happened in my life, whether in terms of I seeking forgiveness or I offering forgiveness, or I just being part of that process of forgiveness, and whatever little I have understood from study and practice as well, is that I feel that forgiveness is a very deeply self-transcendent experience. It calls you to rise above your injury, rise above your pain, not to suppress it, not to deny, not to disregard, but essentially to say that what lies on the other side. And what you said, Joan, so beautifully in your book is that regardless, you know, it's like that tidal wave that beats you on the rock every time you try to face it, and regardless of that, you get up and you make an active choice to say that what lies on the other side. And what is so beautiful about forgiveness is there's this notion of supreme forgiveness in Jain faith, where they say that on the other side, perhaps what you discover is an empathetic understanding of the transgressor's perspective and the transgressor's motive.
Mm.
And on the other side, there's every likelihood that you emerge more human and more humane yourself.
This wonderful quality of the possibility of being more human. You know, somebody just said in the chat, you know, I visualize forgiveness a little bit differently, that I dump my rocks over the cliff so I'm free of them versus making a bridge with them. And this is one of the reasons Jeannie and I talk so much about resilience as being a practice, is it is ours individually, right? The metaphors we create, the ways in which we define these terms belong to us personally. And what we try to do is just kind of seed that. Amanda, does anybody else want to jump in, or we're going to send people off to groups now?
I think we're good to go off.
Do you need the slides again?
Yeah, I don't see any other hands or anything. So
There's a question.
So Jeannie's going to give you the question while I'm going to just set up the group room here.
Okay. The question for today around forgiveness is, how is practicing forgiveness fostering your resilience through the COVID-19 pandemic?